Lucia took a deep breath as she stood in front of the sleek glass building that housed her new workplace. The morning sun reflected off the windows, casting a warm glow that seemed to promise new beginnings. Today was her first day as a secretary at Pinnacle Enterprises, and she couldn't shake off the mixture of excitement and nervousness bubbling inside her. As she walked through the revolving doors, Lucia felt the weight of her own uniqueness. She was the only black woman in a sea of white faces, and that reality was impossible to ignore. The lobby was bright and modern, filled with polished marble and contemporary art that hung on the walls. She noticed a few employees chatting by the coffee machine, their laughter ringing through the space. Lucia offered them a polite smile, but their eyes barely lingered on her before they turned back to their conversations. "Good morning." Lucia greeted the receptionist, who was busy typing away on her computer. The receptionist barely acknowledged her. A curt nod the only response. Lucia made her way to the elevator, her heart racing a bit. The ride up was uneventful, the atmosphere heavy with silence as each passenger stared blankly at the floor numbers lighting up. When the doors opened, she stepped into a bustling office filled with the sounds of ringing phones and clacking keyboards. "Hey, you must be the new secretary," a friendly voice called out. Lucia turned to see Mark, her immediate supervisor, making his way toward her. He had a warm smile and an easy demeanor that immediately put her at ease. "Yes, that's me. I'm Lucia," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Great to have you on board. I'll show you around and introduce you to everyone," Mark said, leading her through the maze of desks and cubicles. As they walked, Lucia felt a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Would they accept her? Would she fit in? The introductions were quick, and Lucia was pleased to see that Mark made an effort to introduce her to everyone. However, she couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider. Most of her colleagues exchanged polite smiles but quickly returned to their work, as if she was just another part of the office furniture. The first few days passed in a blur of new tasks and faces. Lucia found herself adjusting to the fast-paced environment. She was responsible for managing schedules, answering calls, and organizing meetings. Each time she entered the break room, she felt eyes on her, and a few whispers would die down as she walked past. It was clear she was being watched, and it left her feeling exposed. But Lucia was determined to make her mark. She threw herself into her work, quickly learning the ins and outs of the office. Her attention to detail and strong work ethic caught Mark's eye, and he often praised her efficiency. Still, despite her efforts, the lingering feeling of isolation didn't fade. Every day, without fail, Lucia took her lunch break at precisely noon. She would leave the office, walk to a small cafe down the street, and grab a quick bite before returning. It was a routine that provided her with a moment of solace amidst the chaos of the office. However, there was one thing that made her breaks particularly frustrating. The bathroom situation was less than ideal. The only restroom she had access to was located in a different wing of the building and was often dirty. As the only black woman in the office, Lucia had noticed that she was expected to use this restroom, separate from where her colleagues went. It was a humiliating reminder of the unspoken rules that existed within the workplace. On one particularly busy day, Lucia found herself needing to go, but the restroom was occupied. After waiting for what felt like forever, she decided to head to the other bathroom, located at the far end of the building. The journey was long, and she couldn't help but feel the weight of each step. As she finally reached the restroom, she noticed it was grimy and poorly maintained. "Why is this the only option for me?" she wondered, her frustration simmering as she took care of her business. Lucia couldn't help but feel that if she were one of her white colleagues, this wouldn't be an issue. Returning to her desk, Lucia shook off the negative thoughts. She had work to do, and she was determined to succeed. But as the days turned into weeks, the unfair treatment gnawed at her. The restroom situation weighed heavily on her mind, and she knew she had to address it sooner or later. This realization led her to a pivotal moment. Little did she know, her courage to speak up would change everything. Days turned into weeks, and Lucia found herself getting lost in the rhythm of office life. The work was engaging, and she relished the challenges that came her way. However, the bathroom issue loomed over her like a dark cloud. Each time she took those long walks to the dingy restroom, her frustration grew. It wasn't just about the inconvenience. It was the blatant reminder of the unspoken boundaries drawn in the workplace. One afternoon, as Lucia sat at her desk sorting through papers, she overheard two colleagues discussing an upcoming company event. Their chatter was light and casual, but it stung as she listened, realizing that while they shared jokes and laughter, she remained on the outside looking in. Lucia, Mark's voice broke her from her thoughts. He was standing at the entrance to her cubicle, an encouraging smile on his face. "Can you help me with the presentation slides for tomorrow? I think you'll have some great ideas." Her heart lifted at the thought of contributing something meaningful. "Of course, I'd love to," she replied, her spirits brightening. As they worked together, Lucia felt a sense of camaraderie with Mark. He treated her as an equal, valuing her input and insights. They bounced ideas off each other, and for the first time in weeks, she felt like she truly belonged. However, the euphoria of collaboration was short-lived. When lunchtime rolled around, Lucia excused herself, needing to use the restroom. As she made her way down the hallway, she noticed the usual groups of employees gathered in the break room, enjoying their lunch and chatting animatedly. They didn't pay her any mind, and that familiar sense of isolation crept back in. As she approached the bathroom, Lucia caught a glimpse of the employee restroom sign. It felt ironic. How could it be labeled that when it was clearly unfit for any employee? After waiting for a while, she finally pushed the door open and grimaced at the sight. The floor was sticky, and the air reeked of something foul. This was not where she should be spending her breaks. Once she finished, Lucia left the restroom, trying to shake off the discomfort. But as she returned to her desk, a thought struck her. Why was she putting up with this? If she didn't stand up for herself, who would? Over the next few days, Lucia began to observe the behavior of her colleagues more closely. She noticed how they seemed to breeze in and out of the nicer restroom, their conversations filled with laughter while she was stuck in the distance. It became painfully clear that her presence was seen as an inconvenience rather than a valued asset. One evening, as Lucia gathered her things to leave, Mark approached her. "Hey, I wanted to thank you for your help with the presentation. You really made it shine." "Thank you. I enjoyed working on it," she replied, a small smile forming on her lips. But before she could leave, Mark's expression changed. "Can I ask you something? I've noticed you've been taking longer breaks. Is everything okay?" Lucia hesitated. This was the moment she had been waiting for, but the fear of how he might react held her back. It's just," she began, then steeled herself. "The restroom situation isn't great. I have to go far to find a decent place, and it's uncomfortable." Mark frowned, his brow furrowing in concern. "I had no idea. Why hasn't anyone mentioned this before?" Lucia shrugged, her heart racing. "I don't know. Maybe they think it's normal, but it's not. It's degrading." "I'm really sorry you're dealing with this," Mark said, his voice sincere. "I'll look into it." No one should have to feel uncomfortable at work. His words provided a small sense of relief. Lucia had voiced her concerns, and Mark was taking her seriously. But as she left the office that evening, her stomach churned with a mix of hope and anxiety. Would he really do something about it? That night, as she prepared for bed, Lucia thought about her journey. She realized that this was more than just a personal issue. It was about creating a workplace where everyone could feel respected and valued. The thought of being a voice for change filled her with determination. The next day, as she walked into the office, Lucia felt a shift within her. She was ready to fight for not only herself, but for anyone who might be in her position. It was time to break down the walls that had been built around her, and she knew she had to start with Mark. The following morning, Lucia arrived at the office with a renewed sense of purpose. She was determined to push through the discomfort and take a stand. After a quick coffee at the cafe, she made her way to her desk, ready to face whatever challenges the day would bring. As she settled in, she couldn't shake off the nervous energy buzzing in her stomach. Mark had promised to look into the restroom situation, but she needed to do more than just wait. Today, she planned to gather her thoughts and prepare for a conversation with him about her experiences. During her breaks, Lucia began jotting down notes. She recalled specific instances when she felt uncomfortable and isolated, trying to articulate how the situation affected her and potentially others in the office. The more she wrote, the more clarity she gained. She wanted to present her case not just as a personal grievance, but as an opportunity for the company to foster a more inclusive environment. As lunchtime approached, Lucia walked over to Mark's office. She took a deep breath, steadying herself before knocking on the door. "Hey, Mark, do you have a moment?" "Of course, Lucia. Come in," he replied, gesturing for her to sit. "I wanted to follow up about the restroom situation," she began, her voice steady but her heart racing. "I've been thinking a lot about it, and I believe it's not just about me. It reflects a broader issue within the workplace culture." Mark nodded, leaning back in his chair, his expression attentive. "Go on." Lucia explained how the current restroom policy affected her day-to-day experience and how it created an uncomfortable environment. "It's not just about the restroom itself. It symbolizes how diversity is often overlooked here. It sends a message that some employees matter more than others." Mark's brow furrowed as he listened, clearly processing her words. "You're right, Lucia. This is something we need to address. What do you suggest?" She had thought about this too. "Perhaps we can advocate for a review of the restroom policy and implement training for staff on diversity and inclusion. It's not just about making changes. It's about changing mindsets." "Those are excellent ideas," Mark said, his voice growing more enthusiastic. "I can present this to management. It's crucial that everyone feels comfortable and valued at work. Thank you for bringing this to my attention." As they continued discussing potential solutions, Lucia felt a weight lift off her shoulders. For the first time, she felt heard and respected. Mark's openness reassured her that change was possible and that her voice mattered. As the week went on, Lucia noticed subtle shifts in the office dynamics. Mark began sharing her suggestions during team meetings, advocating for a more inclusive workplace culture. Slowly but surely, her colleagues started engaging in conversations about diversity and respect. One day, after a particularly impactful team meeting, Mark pulled Lucia aside. "You've made a real difference, you know that? The management is taking your suggestions seriously, and I think they're considering a company-wide diversity initiative." Lucia felt a rush of pride. "Really? That's amazing." "Absolutely. But I also want you to know that your perspective is invaluable. I think you could play a larger role in this," Mark added, a hint of excitement in his voice. "Me? How? She asked, surprised. I'd like to consider you for a leadership position in the diversity initiative. You've shown incredible insight and passion, and I believe you can help lead this change, he said, his eyes sparkling with encouragement. Lucia's heart raced. This was the opportunity she had always hoped for, but never thought possible. Wow! That would be incredible. I'd love to help in any way I can. Mark smiled. Let's set up a meeting with the management to discuss this further. You deserve this, Lucia. That evening, Lucia returned home, her mind buzzing with possibilities. This wasn't just about a better restroom. It was about creating a space where everyone felt valued and included. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to embrace the challenge. As she settled into bed, Lucia couldn't help but think back to the nervous woman who had walked into the office weeks ago. She had transformed into someone who was not only willing to speak up, but also eager to make a difference. This was just the beginning. The following week was a whirlwind for Lucia. Excitement mixed with anxiety as she prepared for the upcoming meeting with management regarding the diversity initiative. She spent countless hours drafting proposals, outlining the need for change, and gathering support from her colleagues. With each passing day, her resolve strengthened, but the weight of expectation loomed over her. On the day of the meeting, Lucia arrived early, her heart pounding with anticipation. The boardroom was a stark contrast to her usual workspace, filled with polished furniture and sleek technology. She took a deep breath, reminding herself of the importance of what she was about to present. As she entered, Mark was already there, reviewing his notes. You're going to do great, Lucia. Just remember, your voice matters, he said, giving her an encouraging smile. When the management team arrived, Lucia felt a rush of adrenaline. She was surrounded by seasoned executives, some of whom had been with the company for years. Taking her seat, she glanced around the room, noting their serious expressions. It was time to share her vision. Mark opened the meeting by presenting the background of the initiative, emphasizing the need for an inclusive workplace. Then he turned to Lucia. I'd like to invite Lucia to share her thoughts and suggestions on how we can create a more diverse environment. With all eyes on her, Lucia stood up, clutching her notes tightly. Thank you, everyone, for this opportunity. I'm honored to be here today to discuss something that deeply matters to me and, I believe, to all of us. As she began to speak, her nerves started to fade, replaced by the passion she felt for the cause. She outlined her experiences and observations, detailing how the current restroom situation was just a symptom of a larger problem. She spoke about the importance of diversity and how it could benefit not only the employees, but also the company's bottom line. I truly believe that a diverse and inclusive workplace fosters creativity and innovation, Lucia concluded. If we want to attract the best talent and create a positive company culture, we must make everyone feel valued and respected. The room was silent for a moment, and Lucia held her breath, waiting for their response. Then, to her surprise, one of the executives, a stern-looking woman with glasses, spoke up. Thank you for your insights, Lucia. It's refreshing to hear a perspective from someone directly affected by these policies. We need to prioritize change. Lucia's heart raced. It was the validation she had hoped for. The discussion continued, with management asking questions and seeking clarification. Lucia felt empowered, engaging with them and defending her points passionately. However, not everyone in the room was supportive. A senior executive, known for his traditional views, raised his hand. While I appreciate the sentiment, we've always had our policies in place for a reason. Change is not something we can take lightly. His words stung, but Lucia stood her ground. I understand that change can be challenging, but the reality is that the workplace must evolve to reflect the society we live in. If we want to be leaders in our industry, we need to set an example. The back and forth continued, and Lucia felt a wave of doubt creeping in. Was she really making an impact, or was this just a futile effort? Mark caught her eye and nodded, silently encouraging her to keep going. After what felt like an eternity, the meeting came to a close. The management team thanked Lucia for her contributions, promising to consider her proposals. As she left the room, a mix of relief and exhaustion washed over her. Mark joined her in the hallway. "You did an amazing job, Lucia. They listened to you, and that's a huge step forward." "Thanks, Mark. But I can't shake the feeling that not everyone is on board. What if they just brush this off?" she replied, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "Change takes time, but you planted the seed today. It's important to keep pushing forward," he reassured her. Over the next few weeks, Lucia continued to advocate for the initiative, attending meetings, organizing discussions, and gathering feedback from her colleagues. She realized that while the journey was filled with challenges, she wasn't alone. Many of her co-workers rallied around her, expressing their support and sharing their own experiences. But as her visibility grew, so did the scrutiny. Some colleagues began whispering about her rapid rise, and the senior executive who opposed her ideas seemed to have his sights set on undermining her efforts. Lucia felt the pressure mounting, but she was determined not to back down. One afternoon, as she was reviewing feedback from her team, she received an email that made her stomach drop. It was from the senior executive, questioning her qualifications and accusing her of stirring up unnecessary drama in the workplace. The message was condescending and belittling, and Lucia felt her heart race with frustration. Sitting at her desk, she took a deep breath and reminded herself of the journey she had undertaken. This was bigger than just her. It was about creating a workplace where everyone could thrive. She couldn't let fear silence her voice. With renewed determination, Lucia began drafting a response. She wanted to address his concerns, but also reaffirm her commitment to the initiative. She believed in her vision, and it was time to stand strong. The following morning, Lucia sat at her desk, still feeling the weight of the senior executive's email. It lingered in her mind, a constant reminder of the obstacles she faced. But instead of allowing it to discourage her, she decided to use it as motivation. She was determined to respond thoughtfully and assertively, ready to stand her ground. After careful consideration, she crafted a reply that addressed the executive's concerns directly while emphasizing the importance of the diversity initiative. Lucia expressed her belief in the power of diverse perspectives and how they could strengthen the company. She reminded him that change often comes from challenging the status quo, and that her intention was to foster a more inclusive environment for everyone. With her heart pounding, she hit send. A sense of relief washed over her. She had taken a stand, and now it was out of her hands. As the days passed, Lucia focused on her work and the upcoming diversity meeting she had scheduled with Mark. The company had agreed to launch an official diversity initiative, and Lucia was excited yet apprehensive about leading the first team meeting. She wanted to ensure everyone felt comfortable sharing their thoughts and experiences. When the day arrived, she arrived early to set up the room. Lucia arranged the chairs in a circle, hoping to create a more inviting atmosphere. When her colleagues began to filter in, she greeted each person warmly, feeling a mix of nervousness and excitement. Mark entered and gave her a thumbs up. "You've got this, Lucia. Just remember, everyone is here to support you," he said, settling into a chair. As the meeting began, Lucia took a deep breath and introduced the initiative, sharing the goals and objectives. She encouraged open dialogue, assuring her colleagues that their voices mattered. To her relief, people began to share their experiences, stories of exclusion, microaggressions, and the longing for a more supportive environment. One by one, her co-workers opened up, and Lucia felt a sense of camaraderie developing in the room. Each story shared highlighted the need for change, reinforcing the importance of the initiative. It was powerful to witness her colleagues come together, united by a common goal. But just as the mood began to shift towards optimism, the senior executive who had previously challenged her unexpectedly walked in. His presence felt like a shadow looming over the group, and Lucia's heart sank. "Is this a support group or a company meeting?" he asked, a smirk on his face. "Are we really discussing our feelings instead of focusing on our work?" The atmosphere in the room shifted as everyone fell silent, tension palpable. Lucia felt a rush of anger, but quickly reminded herself of her purpose. "Actually, we're here to discuss how we can improve our workplace culture, which ultimately benefits our performance as a team," she replied firmly, keeping her voice steady. "Right? Well, I'm just saying that we shouldn't waste time on this," he retorted, crossing his arms. "We have work to do." Lucia took a moment, feeling the weight of her colleagues' gazes on her. She knew this was a pivotal moment, one that could define her journey in the company. "I understand that you have concerns, but creating a supportive environment is essential for our success. A happy team is a productive team," she countered, maintaining eye contact with him. To her surprise, several colleagues began to chime in, voicing their agreement. "It's important that we feel valued," one co-worker said. "Lucia is right. We need to address these issues if we want to move forward as a company." Seeing the support from her teammates ignited something within Lucia. She felt emboldened to continue advocating for what she believed in. "This is not just about feelings. It's about our future as a company. Embracing diversity can lead to innovation and growth," she declared. The senior executive's expression hardened, but Lucia sensed that he was losing ground. After a few more heated exchanges, he finally huffed and exited the room, leaving an air of uncertainty behind him. As the meeting continued, the initial tension began to dissipate. Lucia's colleagues shared their ideas on how to promote inclusivity, and by the end, they had formulated a plan for the diversity initiative. It felt like a victory. After the meeting, Mark approached Lucia, pride evident in his eyes. "You handled that incredibly well. You've made a significant impact today." "Thanks, Mark. I couldn't have done it without everyone's support," Lucia replied, feeling a sense of belonging. In the following weeks, the diversity initiative gained momentum. Lucia organized workshops, invited guest speakers, and created a platform for employees to share their stories. The company started to shift, slowly but surely. Lucia could feel the energy changing as her colleagues began to engage in meaningful conversations about inclusivity. However, the senior executive was not done fighting. He continued to challenge Lucia's ideas during meetings, attempting to undermine her authority. But she remained resolute, refusing to let his negativity shake her confidence. One afternoon, while reviewing feedback from a recent workshop, Lucia received a notification that her proposal for a diversity summit had been approved by upper management. The summit would bring together employees from different departments to share experiences and strategies for creating a more inclusive workplace. As she celebrated this achievement with her colleagues, Lucia couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. The timid woman who had hesitated to speak up now stood at the forefront of a movement, and she felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. But the fight was far from over, and Lucia knew she would need to stay strong in the face of adversity. The day of the Diversity Summit arrived, and Lucia felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. She had put in countless hours organizing the event, coordinating with speakers, and ensuring everything was in place. This was her chance to showcase the importance of the diversity initiative to the entire company. As she arrived at the conference room, she was greeted by the sight of colorful banners and motivational quotes adorning the walls. She took a moment to soak it all in, feeling a surge of pride. The summit was a symbol of progress, and she was ready to lead it. When employees began to filter in, Lucia greeted them with a warm smile, ensuring they felt welcomed. The room buzzed with anticipation, and as the attendees settled into their seats, Lucia took the stage. Her heart raced, but she reminded herself of the purpose behind this gathering. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today," she began, her voice steady. "We're gathered here to discuss the importance of diversity and inclusion in our workplace, and to share ideas on how we can create a better environment for everyone." As she spoke, Lucia could see the interest in her colleagues' eyes. She outlined the agenda for the day, introducing the speakers who would share their experiences and insights. The atmosphere was charged with enthusiasm, and she felt empowered by the energy in the room. The first speaker, a renowned advocate for diversity in the workplace, captivated the audience with her compelling stories. Lucia watched as her colleagues leaned in, nodding in agreement. It was evident that the message was resonating, and she felt a swell of hope for the future. After the keynote speech, Lucia facilitated breakout sessions where employees could discuss specific topics related to diversity and inclusion. The discussions were lively, and people shared personal stories that sparked heartfelt conversations. Lucia moved from group to group, engaging with her co-workers and encouraging them to share their thoughts. However, amidst the positivity, she noticed a familiar face lurking at the back of the room, the senior executive who had previously challenged her. He had come to observe, and she could sense his disapproval as he crossed his arms and frowned at the proceedings. Lucia didn't let it deter her. She continued to guide the sessions, asking thought-provoking questions and facilitating discussions that encouraged everyone to participate. She wanted to create an environment where everyone felt safe and valued. As the day progressed, Lucia felt a sense of accomplishment building within her. The summit was a success, and the feedback from her colleagues was overwhelmingly positive. People were engaging in conversations about how to implement the ideas discussed, and Lucia could see a shift in attitudes. However, as the event came to a close, the senior executive approached her, a stern look on his face. "I hope you realize that this isn't the way we do things around here," he said, his tone sharp. "We can't just change everything based on a few stories." Lucia took a deep breath, knowing this moment would define her response. "With all due respect, this is exactly how change happens. We listen, we learn, and we adapt," she replied, her voice calm but firm. He scoffed but didn't press further, walking away with a frustrated huff. Lucia felt a mix of triumph and unease. While she had stood her ground, she knew he wouldn't back down easily. In the following weeks, the conversation sparked by the summit continued to flourish. More employees began to approach Lucia, sharing their ideas for furthering the diversity initiative. They suggested additional workshops, mentorship programs, and community outreach efforts. It was invigorating to see her colleagues embrace the concept of inclusivity. Yet, the senior executive remained a thorn in her side. He continued to undermine her efforts in meetings, questioning the validity of the initiatives and attempting to sway others against her. Lucia remained focused, refusing to let his negativity overshadow the progress they were making. One afternoon, while preparing for a meeting with the leadership team, Lucia received an unexpected email. It was an invitation to present the diversity initiative to the board of directors. Her heart raced with excitement. This was a chance to advocate for change at the highest level of the company. As she prepared her presentation, Lucia felt a surge of determination. She carefully crafted her slides, incorporating the feedback and ideas gathered from her colleagues. She wanted to showcase not only the challenges they faced, but also the incredible potential for growth that diversity offered. On the day of the presentation, she arrived early, her palms sweaty with nerves. As the board members filed into the room, Lucia reminded herself of her purpose. She was there to represent her colleagues, to share their stories and drive meaningful change. With each slide, she felt more confident. She spoke passionately about the benefits of diversity, presenting data that highlighted the positive impact of inclusive workplaces on productivity and innovation. She shared personal stories from her colleagues, emphasizing the need for a supportive environment. When she finished, there was a moment of silence before the board members began to applaud. Lucia's heart swelled with pride. She had made her case, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. However, as she stepped down from the podium, the senior executive stood up. "While I appreciate your enthusiasm, I still believe that this initiative is unnecessary. We're a successful company, and change like this isn't needed," he stated, a hint of disdain in his voice. Lucia's pulse quickened, but she refused to be intimidated. Success isn't just about numbers. It's about people. If we want to stay relevant in today's world, we must adapt and embrace diversity. It's not just the right thing to do. It's the smart thing to do, she countered. The room fell silent again, and Lucia could see the board members exchanging glances. There was a tension in the air, but she sensed a shift. Many of them appeared to be contemplating her words. After the meeting, Lucia received messages of support from several board members. They expressed their appreciation for her presentation and the importance of the diversity initiative. It felt like a victory, but she knew the fight was far from over. With renewed determination, Lucia left the meeting feeling empowered. She knew she was on the right path, and she was ready to continue advocating for change, no matter the challenges ahead. In the weeks following her presentation to the board, Lucia felt a surge of momentum. The company had begun to embrace the diversity initiative more wholeheartedly, implementing new training sessions and actively encouraging employees to share their experiences. Yet, the underlying tension with the senior executive persisted, and Lucia knew she had to navigate this carefully. One morning, while reviewing the feedback from the summit, she received an unexpected call from the CEO's office. The CEO wanted to meet with her to discuss her initiatives further. Excitement bubbled within her, but anxiety soon followed. What would he say? Would he support her, or was this a setup for criticism? When the day of the meeting arrived, Lucia dressed in her best professional attire, determined to make a good impression. She arrived at the CEO's office, her heart racing as she stepped into the sleek, modern space. The CEO greeted her warmly and gestured for her to sit. "Lucia, I've been following your work with the diversity initiative, and I must say, I'm impressed," he began, his tone sincere. "I believe this is a crucial step for our company's future. However, I've also heard some concerns regarding the pushback from a few executives." Lucia nodded, her heart pounding. Yes, there has been some resistance, particularly from senior executive's name. He believes that the initiative isn't necessary and has expressed doubts about its effectiveness. The CEO leaned back in his chair, contemplating her words. "I appreciate you bringing this to my attention. It's vital that we address these concerns openly. I want you to have my full support in moving forward, but I need you to keep me updated on any developments." Feeling a wave of relief, Lucia replied, "Thank you. I will definitely keep you informed. I truly believe in the potential of this initiative, and I'm committed to making a difference." As she left the CEO's office, Lucia felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that having the CEO's backing would lend her credibility and strength as she continued to advocate for change. However, she also knew she had to be cautious. The senior executive would likely escalate his efforts to undermine her. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Lucia organized workshops that focused on unconscious bias, inclusivity, and allyship. Employees began to engage in discussions that they had previously avoided, and she could feel a shift in the company culture. Colleagues who once hesitated to speak up were now sharing their perspectives openly, which was a testament to the progress being made. However, behind the scenes, the senior executive was rallying some of the old guard to question Lucia's approach. He often called meetings to discuss the distraction of the diversity initiative, framing it as a waste of resources that could be better spent on productivity. One afternoon, Lucia overheard a conversation between him and another executive in the break room. "I don't understand why we're wasting time on this nonsense. It's not going to change the way we do business," he scoffed. Lucia's heart sank, knowing that she had to confront this head-on. That evening, she composed an email to the CEO, detailing the feedback she had heard about the senior executive's resistance. She highlighted the positive changes within the company and the necessity of continuous support for the diversity initiative. With a deep breath, she hit send, unsure of how he would respond. The next day, she received a prompt reply from the CEO, thanking her for her honesty and requesting a meeting to discuss the ongoing challenges. Lucia felt a surge of courage. This was her opportunity to advocate for the initiative and address the senior executive's interference directly. When the day of the meeting arrived, Lucia prepared thoroughly, gathering data and testimonials from employees who had benefited from the diversity initiative. She was determined to present a compelling case. As they sat down, Lucia noticed the CEO's attentive demeanor. "Lucia, I appreciate your dedication to this initiative. I want to understand more about the pushback you're experiencing," he said. Leaning forward, Lucia took a deep breath and laid out her concerns. "I've noticed a pattern of resistance from senior executives' name and a few others. Their skepticism is creating an environment where employees feel hesitant to fully engage with the initiative." The CEO nodded thoughtfully. "What do you propose we do about it?" Lucia felt a wave of relief wash over her. This was the support she needed. "I believe it would be beneficial to address the concerns in a company-wide meeting. It's essential that everyone understands the value of this initiative and how it aligns with our company's goals." The CEO agreed, and they discussed logistics for the meeting. Lucia felt a renewed sense of empowerment. This was her chance to not only defend her initiative, but also to unify the company under a common purpose. As they finalized the details, Lucia couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. She was no longer just the only black woman in the company. She was a leader advocating for change. With the support of the CEO and the momentum from her colleagues, she was ready to confront the challenges ahead. When the day of the company-wide meeting arrived, Lucia was both nervous and excited. Employees filled the conference room, and the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. She stood at the front, flanked by the CEO, who gave her an encouraging nod. "Thank you all for being here today," Lucia began, her voice steady. "We're here to discuss our diversity initiative and why it's essential for our growth as a company." As she spoke, she felt the energy in the room shift. Employees listened intently as she shared the data, testimonials, and stories that highlighted the positive impact of diversity and inclusion. The CEO chimed in, reinforcing her points and emphasizing the company's commitment to fostering an inclusive environment. However, halfway through her presentation, the senior executive stood up. "While I respect the effort, I still believe this initiative is misguided. Our focus should remain on performance, not on identity," he interjected, his voice dripping with disdain. Lucia's heart raced, but she remained composed. "With all due respect," senior executive's name, "diversity isn't a distraction. It's a strategic advantage. Companies that prioritize diversity outperform their competitors. We must evolve to thrive," she asserted. The room fell silent, and Lucia could feel the tension between her and the senior executive. But she also sensed a shift among her colleagues. They were engaged, leaning in, ready to support her. After a brief pause, the CEO stepped in. "I stand with Lucia on this. Diversity is not just a checkbox. It's a crucial part of our company's vision moving forward. We must work together to create a culture that values every employee, regardless of their background." Lucia felt a rush of gratitude toward the CEO. The support from the top was pivotal, and it seemed to sway the room. Employees began to nod in agreement, and the atmosphere shifted toward unity. As the meeting wrapped up, Lucia felt a sense of triumph. She had faced her fears and stood up against resistance. The support of her colleagues and the CEO filled her with hope for the future. However, she knew the journey wasn't over. The senior executive would likely continue to challenge her, but Lucia felt ready to face whatever obstacles lay ahead. She had found her voice, and she was determined to keep advocating for change, one step at a time. In the weeks following the company-wide meeting, Lucia sensed a tangible shift within the organization. The atmosphere was charged with a newfound energy as employees began to engage in discussions about diversity and inclusion. The initiative she had championed was no longer a lone effort. It had become a collective movement within the company. Lucia spent her days attending workshops, facilitating conversations, and encouraging her colleagues to share their experiences. Each session was met with enthusiasm, and employees began to express their ideas about how to make the workplace more inclusive. The positive feedback was overwhelming, and Lucia felt a deep sense of fulfillment in her role. However, as Lucia basked in the progress, she remained mindful of the senior executive who had opposed her at every turn. Despite the momentum, she knew he would not back down easily. In her heart, she understood that resistance would always exist in the face of change. One afternoon, as she prepared for another diversity training session, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from the senior executive, requesting a meeting to discuss the ongoing disruption caused by the diversity initiative. A wave of anxiety washed over her. She could only imagine what he had planned. When the day of the meeting arrived, Lucia entered the conference room with a mixture of determination and trepidation. The senior executive was seated at the table, flanked by a couple of his allies. Their expressions were stern, and Lucia knew this would be a confrontation. "Thank you for coming, Lucia," he began, his voice clipped. "I wanted to discuss the current direction of our diversity efforts. I believe they are becoming divisive rather than unifying." Lucia took a deep breath, knowing she had to remain calm. "I appreciate your concern," senior executive's name, "but I disagree. The feedback we received indicates that employees feel more included and valued than ever before. This initiative is fostering a sense of community." He scoffed, shaking his head. "Community is fine, but our focus should be on results. This initiative is taking resources away from our core business objectives." Lucia's heart raced, but she stood her ground. Diversity and results are not mutually exclusive. In fact, research shows that diverse teams are more innovative and perform better. By investing in this initiative, we are investing in our company's future. The senior executive leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "But at what cost? You're promoting a culture of identity politics that could alienate many employees." As tension filled the room, Lucia noticed the others present beginning to shift in their seats, clearly uncomfortable. "It's not about identity politics. It's about recognizing the value that each individual brings to our team. Every voice matters, and we need to create an environment where everyone feels safe to contribute." Suddenly, the CEO's voice broke through the tension. He had entered the room quietly, but now stood at the doorway, his presence commanding attention. I couldn't help but overhear the conversation. "Lucia is correct. Diversity is integral to our success. This isn't just about making our workplace comfortable. It's about driving performance." The senior executive's expression shifted from condescension to disbelief. "But, sir, this initiative is causing unrest among some of our employees." The CEO replied firmly, "We must be willing to challenge the status quo. If we do not evolve, we risk falling behind." "Lucia, I fully support your efforts and want you to continue leading this initiative." Lucia felt a rush of relief and gratitude wash over her. The CEO's backing was a powerful statement, and she could see the shift in the room as her colleagues began to nod in agreement. "Let's focus on moving forward together," the CEO continued. "I want us to have an open dialogue about these initiatives. We will not ignore the concerns of any employee, but we will also not shy away from the necessary progress." As the meeting concluded, Lucia left the room with renewed determination. The senior executive may have challenged her, but she had stood her ground and earned the support of the CEO and her colleagues. In the months that followed, Lucia's leadership flourished. The diversity initiative gained momentum, with more employees stepping up to take on roles as advocates for inclusion. They organized events, mentorship programs, and discussions that spurred deeper understanding among colleagues. One day, Lucia received an invitation to speak at a major industry conference about her experiences and the importance of diversity in the workplace. It was an incredible opportunity to share her story and highlight the positive changes happening within her company. On the day of the conference, Lucia stood backstage, her heart racing with excitement and nerves. As she stepped onto the stage, she looked out at the audience filled with professionals from across the industry. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice steady. "Today, I want to share my journey and the transformative power of diversity in the workplace. I hope my story inspires you to champion inclusivity in your own organizations." As she spoke, she felt empowered, sharing the challenges she faced and the progress that had been made. The room was captivated, and she could see nods of agreement and understanding among the audience. When Lucia finished her speech, the applause echoed throughout the hall. She felt a wave of gratitude for the support of her colleagues and the opportunity to make a difference. The journey had not been easy, but it had been worth every struggle. Later that evening, as she reflected on the day, she received a message from the CEO. He congratulated her on her powerful presentation and expressed pride in the strides the company was making toward inclusivity. Lucia realized that she was not just a secretary anymore. She had become a leader, an advocate for change, and a source of inspiration for others. The work was far from over, but with each step forward, she was helping to build a future where every employee, regardless of their background, could thrive. As she closed her laptop and prepared for bed, Lucia felt a sense of peace wash over her. She was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that she was making a difference, not just for herself, but for all those who would come after her.